Descended from a long line of Jedi, including an uncle and a niece, Plo Koon was a Jedi Master during the last days of the Republic. Despite his appearance, he was a kind and compassionate Jedi, who held the respect of not only his fellow Jedi, but those privileged enough to serve under him. Considered to be humble to a fault, Koon was the last Padawan of the Wookiee Jedi Master Tyvaka. Quickly building a reputation for himself, Plo Koon would be nominated to fill Tyvaka's seat on the Jedi High Council, following Koon's actions in the Stark Hyperspace War. As a master, Plo Koon would complete the training of Boltar Swan, who was the pupil of his fallen friend Micah Giat, and discovered a young Ahsoka Tano. Following the outbreak of the Clone Wars, Koon took on the position of general, and would become highly esteemed for his tactical powers both on and off the battlefield. He would be victorious in the battles of Brental IV, Korm, and many more. Koon would eventually find himself on Cato Neimoidia, where he would be betrayed by his clone troops and shot down in accordance with Order 66. The details surrounding his death would be falsified and tarnished by the Empire. However, they would be unsuccessful in doing so, and by the time of Luke's new Jedi Order, he would once again be respected as an eminent Jedi Master. Speaking of Luke's Jedi Order, there was a Jedi Master who was descended from a long line of Jedi as well, including a father and a grandfather. Corran Horn was a Jedi Master of the new Jedi Order during the early decades of the Galactic Alliance. His analytical nature, along with a strong moral compass, led him to quickly build a reputation with not only his fellow Jedi, but with the pilots and troops he would serve with. Like many Jedi of the era, Horn's training as a Jedi came very late. Already a seasoned veteran of Rogue Squadron, Horn had knowledge of his Force sensitivity, but chose not to act on it for fear of being targeted. However, plans would change once his wife Mirax was kidnapped by a group of pirates. Realizing he would need a new set of skills, Horn delayed going after his wife, in favor of becoming one of the first students at Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy on Yavin 4. While training, Horn would quickly discover that he had little, if any, aptitude with telekinesis, but this was quickly brushed aside when it was learned that he had an incredible aptitude for the ability to create illusions, along with the energy channeling power of Tutaminis. Despite being a mere neophyte Padawan at the time, Horn managed to display an ability with a power beyond that of seasoned masters of the old Jedi Order, and even of the new. Horn's sheer tenacity allowed him to quickly become one of the most skilled and powerful students of the Praxium. His actions during his time on Yavin 4 allowed him to forge strong bonds with Luke Skywalker, Mara Jade, and Cam Solusar, with whom he helped develop many of the Academy's standard training regiments for the future New Jedi Order. Shortly after the fall of the spirit of Exar Kun, Horn would be elevated to the rank of Jedi Knight. He would then leave the Academy and use his new skills to free Mirax, while simultaneously breaking the Galactic Empire's hold on the corporate sector. Following the outbreak of the Yuuzhan Vong War, Corran would become one of the Order's premier field operatives and battlefield commanders. He would defeat the Yuuzhan Vong commander Shadow Shay in a single combat, along with aiding Luke and Mara in unlocking the secrets of the living planet, Zonama Sekat. After Jacen Solo ended the Yuuzhan Vong War with his defeat of Onimi, Horn would be elevated to the rank of Jedi Master and would be given a seat on the newly formed Jedi High Council. Over a decade later, conflict would erupt yet again when events on Corran's homeworld of Corellia spiraled out of control into a galaxy-wide civil war. Despite Horn's dedication to his homeworld, he remained loyal to the Jedi Order and did his best to help steer it through the conflict. Eventually, the Jedi's true enemy would show themselves in the face of Jacen Solo, now the Sith Lord Darth Caedus. Corran would be one of the few masters considered for the position at the head of the strike team that would aim to capture Caedus, though Battlemaster Kyle Katarn would be favored over Horn in this case. 2 years after the death of Caedus, Horn would be involved in the Jedi Order's secret war against the lost tribe of the Sith on Coruscant, one of the 7 members of Grand Master Skywalker's strike team to survive the ambush in the processing plant of the Jedi Temple. Horn, along with Luke Skywalker and Jaina Solo, would battle against wave after wave of 5,000 Sith stationed within the Jedi Temple. All 3 would manage to escape with their lives, though not without several injuries. Horn was alive and well following the Lost Tribe's defeat, and his final fate remains unknown. Hello YouTube, this is the Phoenix Exalt bringing you the next installment of my Versus series. For this analysis, I will be using Plo Koon during the time frame of Revenge of the Sith, and Corran Horn from the time frame of Fate of the Jedi. I will be pulling from Legends continuity along with any canon materials that do not directly interfere with previously made Legends materials. Due to the fact that the Disney Story Group is going in a direction that is neither original nor creative, I will not be using canon as the main point of Star Wars media for my videos. As always, I own none of the characters, art, music, or other media depicted in this video, and all rights to them go to their respective companies. With that out of the way, I present to you Plo Koon vs. Corran Horn. If these 2 legendary masters met on the battlefield, who would be the victor? A native of his species' homeworld of Doran, Plo Koon was a Keldor male who was well into his old age by the time of his death. There is a source that suggests that Plo Koon was born some 300 years prior. However, given that his species aged and died at roughly the same age as humans, this results in me believing that Koon was joking when he said this. As for an estimated age for Koon, it is known that he was a peer of the Maverick Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn. Assuming the 2 were of roughly similar age, this would put Koon in his late 60s to early 70s by the time of his death. Keldor's physiology allowed them greater reflexes and agility as compared to humans, along with a greater degree of protection from environmental hazards such as harsh wind and cold. As for Plo Koon, he has shown himself to be able to survive the vacuum of space for at least a brief time. Force-using members of the Keldor species were able to communicate amongst themselves using telepathy, using the growths on the side of their skull. Keldor were known for having a weaker constitution than humans. However, Plo Koon did not seem to suffer much in this regard. He has survived being buried alive by an avalanche, and has weathered beatings from Savage Opress and Asajj Ventress without faltering. Despite his commendable efforts to enhance his species' strengths and lessen the effects of his weaknesses, there was one weakness Plo Koon could not overcome. Due to the fact that Doran was a world with an atmosphere composed of helium, the oxygen-rich atmosphere encountered on nearly every other world and breathed by every other species was toxic to Koon. Therefore, for Keldor to travel abroad, they required a set of both goggles and a breath mask in order to survive off their homeworld. While it is true that this weakness has only been shown to have been successfully targeted once, it is a weakness that, if exploited, will instantly incapacitate Koon, as he will be blind and suffocating if he were to have that happen to him. That being said, Plo Koon is an exceptional specimen of the Keldor race for his age, and not someone to be trifled with. Corran Horn was a 61-year-old human male who stood at nearly 5 feet and a half tall, while maintaining a healthy and athletic build. Unsurprisingly for a Jedi, Horn has demonstrated exceptional speed and reflexes on numerous occasions. He is augmented both through the Force to easily deflect Sith-aimed blaster bolts, along with keeping up with Council-level adepts such as Kam Solsar and Mara Jade. In terms of strength, Horn has overpowered an emotionally unbalanced Luke Skywalker and blocked strikes from the monstrous Shadow Shay. On the subject of physicality, Horn has survived being speared through the gut with Shadow Shay's amphistaff, which is made more notable considering amphistaff are both venomous and dense enough to parry lightsabers. Additionally, he has survived for what can be presumed to be at least a full day, if not longer, of near constant combat against wave after wave of fresh Sith opponents within the Jedi Temple. And while he did have help from Grand Master Skywalker and the Sword of the Jedi Jaina Solo, the mere fact that he survived with his body mostly intact was astounding. All in all, Corran Horn was an excellent example of the physicality that a human Jedi Council Master would have. This conclusion is easy to call. While Plo Koon's physical feats are incredibly impressive for a Keldor of his age, this does not change the reality of the situation. Corran Horn was roughly a decade younger than Master Koon, and what's more, humans are known to be more durable than the Keldor. Some may argue that Plo Koon would have a greater degree of agility and speed, though I find that unlikely given Horn's showings. Additionally, even if it were true that Horn was slower and less agile than Koon, he has proven that he can deal with opponents faster and more nimble than himself, such as Mara Jade, who was fast enough to dodge Force Lightning. Additionally, the weakness presented by Plo Koon's breath mask cannot be ignored, and such a weakness is precisely the sort of thing that a combatant like Corran Horn would look to exploit. While Koon would have to land multiple debilitating blows to Horn to subdue him, Corran would only have to land one good hit on Koon's breath mask to knock him out. Therefore, Jedi Master Corran Horn gets the edge in physical abilities. One of the most elite swordsmen of his order, Plo Koon was arguably one of the finest lightsaber duelists that the Order ever produced. His renown was such that despite never having engaged in combat, Darth Maul would consider a possible duel with Plo Koon to be a true test of his skills. Plo Koon would, however, engage with the Sith Lord's brother, Savage Opress. Despite the fact that Savage won the duel by swiping Koon's breath mask, Koon did manage to land at least one glancing blow against the Night Brother. Additionally, it should be noted that such a strategy on behalf of Opress was a desperation tactic. It was likely only used for fear of his own life. While it is a stretch to suggest that Plo Koon was in control of this duel, the fact that Koon forced Savage to differ from his normal fighting form is a testament to his superior skill and technical sophistication. More impressively, Plo Koon managed to defeat the noted Jedi killer Asajj Ventress on Quarm, a feat made all the more impressive by the fact that he was suffering from a broken arm at the time. During the course of their duel, he would match both her strength-oriented saber staff technique and her acrobatics-oriented Jar Kai with ease. Though it was not quite a one-sided fight, Koon would manage to disarm Ventress of one of her blades, with an arm almost literally tied behind his back. Keep in mind, this is the same Ventress who has killed multiple Jedi and kept pace with Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. In a rare moment of compliment, Ventress would admit that Koon had fought valiantly that day. As for the specifics of his style, Plo Koon is a master of both Xi'an and Jemso variants of Form 5 lightsaber combat. Unlike the defense-oriented Surisu, Xi'an focused on aimed deflection and sending blaster bullets back at the attacker. This was to turn defensive maneuvers into a viable means of counterattack. Jemso operated in much the same fashion, except oriented towards lightsaber dueling. A practitioner of Jemso focused on deflecting or redirecting an opponent's attack, before responding with a devastating counterattack. It was thanks to the tenets of Form 5 that allowed Koon to be so devastating on the battlefield. He would remain calm at the center of the battle, keeping his options open while remaining on the offensive. due to the fact that Form 5 sacrificed acrobatics for more grounded and stable footwork. That made the form much more sustainable than Form 4 Ataru, and as showcased by his duel with Ventress, while Koon was easily capable of defending against highly acrobatic styles, despite not employing them in combat, his specialization in solely one form of lightsaber combat, Plo Koon was very much a diverse and lethal combat, and I would best describe him as the inverse of Obi-Wan Kenobi. While Kenobi was focused on the defensive, Koon was focused on the offensive, bringing to the table the practical definition of a Tier 2 application of lightsaber combat. Corran was considered to be one of the best lightsaber duelists of the new Jedi Order, on par with the greats of his era. His skills were so renowned that as a Jedi Knight, Horn was thought by his peers to have been a swordsman compared to the legendary Jedi Anakin Skywalker. He was also skilled enough that despite his lacking ability with telekinesis, he was considered alongside Jedi Masters Kyle Katarn and Kip Duran to be team leader for the ambush of Darth Caedus. This was the same Darth Caedus who just a few days before had dueled Grand Master Luke Skywalker on an equal footing and lived to tell about it. In terms of confirmed feats, Corran has dueled Council Masters Mara Jade, Cam Solusar, Saba Sabayatine, and Grand Master Luke Skywalker in high-intensity sparring matches on an equal footing. His most notable kill was against the previously mentioned Yuuzhan Vong commander Shadow Shay, whose martial prowess was respected and feared by warriors on both sides of the conflict. Additionally, Horn has defeated several Gen Sarai warriors along with hordes of Yuuzhan Vong warriors and Lost Tribe of the Sith members. As for the specifics of his technique, Corran utilized both the Three Rings of Defense and Trakata. The Three Rings of Defense would remain his primary martial arts discipline for most of his career. However, towards the latter end of his career, Corran would add Trakata. Essentially a hybrid of the strong, medium, and fast styles, the Three Rings of Defense were a simplistic form of combat designed to introduce the students of Luke's academy to the principles of lightsaber combat. The main difference being that it functioned as one fluid form rather than three separate styles. As described by Corran himself, the style consisted of three sets of unique stances and maneuvers that dealt with dueling at various ranges. The outer ring consists of grand sweeping power attacks, the middle ring consisting of short, sharp strikes designed to redirect projectiles, and the inner ring using tight conservative blocks aimed at shunting aside power attacks and parrying a probing offensive. Trakata was developed during the days of the Old Republic, and was a style built on deception and trickery. Focusing on the fact that a lightsaber can switch on and off at the push of a button, the style capitalized on the fact that such a maneuver would confuse and disorient most opponents who were used to a standard style of fighting. Corran's personal style would make use of both styles he had mastered, and he would use sudden style changes coupled with vicious strikes from all angles to confuse and disorient his opponents before going in for the kill. He would reinforce these sequences with both physical strikes and psychic force abilities. As for defense, Corran would use both acrobatic evasions along with blocks and parries to stop incoming strikes. Against Shadow Shay, he used the Trakata unbalancing block maneuver by rapidly flicking off his blade as the general brought his weapon down before reigniting it for a deadly follow-up. On the tactical side of things, Horn was adept at thinking on his feet and was not above using psychological warfare against his opponents, using verbal taunts and proclamations of defeat to off-balance his opponents and give himself the edge in combat. At the end of the day, Corran was one of the most subversive and lethal duelists that the new Jedi Order would ever produce. A pure lightsaber duel between these two master swordsmen comes down to the technicalities of their respective skill sets. Plo Koon's strength-based style will not contain anything that Corran has not seen from the likes of Shadow Shay, Cam Solusar, and Luke Skywalker. Likewise, if Plo Koon can deal with Asajj Ventress with an arm tied behind his back, it is not a stretch to suggest that he could deal with Corran's speed and agility at full strength. However, that is where the canceling out ends. Corran will be using a hybridization of a style that was developed after Koon's death, along with perhaps one of, if not the most, rare form of traditional lightsaber combat. Blending these two together will result in a style that Plo Koon would have no chance of having seen before. Additionally, while I can see that it is likely that Plo Koon has some knowledge of how to counter Trakata, he will have had no experience with the Three Rings, and therefore, while he would have the skill to defend against it, he would not have the necessary knowledge to properly counter this style. Corran, on the other hand, will have seen the tenets of Form 5 before in the form of Luke Skywalker and Cam Solusar, who especially during the days of the first Jedi Praxium, had a style that was extremely close to Form 5, with a strength-based style that was directly comparable to the likes of Anakin Skywalker, or even Plo Koon. Due to these factors, I give Corran Horn the slight edge, and I must stress, very slight edge in martial arts and lightsaber dueling. As a lifetime member of the Jedi Council, Plo Koon was one of the most powerful Jedi of his era. That being said, Koon was a Jedi known more for the variety of his abilities, rather than his raw power. Listed in his character sheet as a telekinetic savant, Koon made use of a wide array of telekinetic abilities, moving from his allies in the midst of combat to give them a better vantage point, or scattering his enemies with a well-timed force wave. Koon's telepathic powers were also highly advanced and allowed him to communicate with his niece, Sha Koon, from halfway across the galaxy with the aid of a few Jedi Masters. More impressively, he was able to easily probe the mind of Iago Stark, being able to eavesdrop on his enemies' plans at will. In addition to being a Jedi Master, Plo Koon was also a member of the Baron Do Sages, an obscure order of Force adepts based on Doran. Under their guidance, Master Koon would learn the Anya Seth technique that allowed one to not only guard against mental intrusion, but to appear dead on a brain scan. Plo Koon's time under the Baron Do Sages seemed to have also improved his ability to use the Force for more environmental purposes, such as freezing small bodies of water or influencing a nearby fog to cover the position of his army. Additionally, Plo Koon was known to have an ability with Malacia, an ability that would induce extreme dizziness and nausea in a target, the sensation of which was likened to being struck on the head by a hammer. While strictly non-lethal, the power required the user to be able to physically see the one being affected by it, and while its effect on Force users has never been documented, it is my belief that any Force user with a strong enough mental defense could overcome this power. Plo Koon has demonstrated at the very least a limited capacity with the healing arts, being able to treat the soldiers under his command. However, unlike the likes of Ki-Adi-Mundi or Anya Kuro, he was evidently unable to mend broken bones and blaster burns on the fly. Koon's most infamous power was Force Lightning, which first manifested itself during a hostage situation and would later be refined to what he would term Electric Judgment. Darth Plagueis would once remark to Darth Sidious that a Jedi sufficiently powerful in the Force would be able to produce lightning. However, it would be significantly less powerful than true Sith lightning. That being said, while Plagueis believed that this was because the Jedi were inherently weaker than the Sith, I find it much more likely that this was because of the Jedi mentality rather than a lack of power, as someone like Grand Master Skywalker being unable to kill someone with his Force lightning seems highly unlikely. It is my opinion that the reason for Jedi lightnings, and in this case Plo Koon's electric judgments, lesser power is due to the intent of the wielder, with Jedi typically aiming for the non-lethal option. However, for whether or not Plo Koon can kill using the power, we must look to a quote from Koon himself. Koon stated in his report to the Jedi Council that he never felt compelled to use the power lethally. Notably, he did not say that it was non-lethal, but rather he was not compelled to kill with it. This makes it clear to me that Plo Koon was capable of using a lethal variant of electric judgment if he so chose. In the end, Plo Koon's abilities as a Force wielder can be characterized by a willingness to explore every aspect of his powers and utilize all of them as a servant of the light. As a member of one of the most famous Jedi families in the galaxy, the Halcyons, it comes as no surprise that Corran Horn was one of the most powerful Jedi of his era. He was especially known for his strength and the more subversive aspects of the Force, rather the flashy abilities that employed by the likes of Luke Skywalker and Kip Duran. As previously mentioned, Horn was a master of physical augmentation and was able to perform the superhuman feats common to all Jedi. As for his telekinetic abilities, Horn would be the first to admit that unless he was under extreme duress, he could not so much as tickle the drool from a Hutt's lips. This remains true for his telekinetic defenses as well, having been ragdolled by every being who has attempted to do so. Horn's character sheet lists him as an influence savant, which included powers such as dominating mind tricks, complete short-term memory erasure, participating in battle melds, battle mind, projective telepathy that could cause a being to experience hallucinations, heightened sensibilities, farsight, and the beast trick ability. Horn's telepathic abilities were such that he was able to influence other trained Force users, the most notable example being when he convinced Luke Skywalker, along with the rest of his fellow apprentices, that he was telekinetically lifting a massive boulder, when in reality it hadn't moved an inch. Though it should be noted that Luke would quickly see through the illusion and break the spell. He would also cause fellow Jedi Ganner Rhysode to double over and vomit via his telepathic powers in order to avoid Ganner from foolishly beginning a fight that they could not win. Next in Corran's bag of tricks came Tutaminis, also known as Negate Energy. Tutaminis involved from taking any form of energy, be it flames, blasters, lightning, even lightsabers, and either absorbing it or channeling it out of the body. While not an inherently restrictive power, it was incredibly difficult to learn and master, with a practitioner to be highly commended for managing to dispel concentrating energy bursts such as blaster fire. Corran Horn is one of the few Jedi in galactic history to be credited with fully mastering the power, which implies that all forms of energy-based attacks and weapons would have the potential to be negated by him. He has already used the power to absorb the heat from a volcanic spring, building leveling explosions, and Ganner's lightsaber. What's more, Corran could channel the energy he absorbed into his telekinetic powers, allowing him to perform the basic pushes and shoves that a normal Jedi could accomplish. Additionally, he was able to absorb Force energy hurled at him and turn it into a shield, thereby negating Force pushes and waves. Horn's Force shields are credited with being stronger than those of Master Duran. This is likely due to the fact that Corran could strengthen them as the power of the attack he was absorbing increased, therefore giving himself a stronger barrier. In perhaps the most notable of his feats, Horn absorbed the power of several building leveling explosions, and used the energy to project a massive illusion of a Jedi with a lightsaber made of flames that would be seen by the entirety of the nearby city. Lastly, it should be noted that while Corran's ability to absorb Force pushes and shoves made him virtually immune to the power, he was unable to absorb the Force grip and Force crush abilities, as those powers do not involve launching energy at the opponent, and therefore cannot be absorbed by Corran. All in all, Corran was a diverse and powerful Force wielder, whose lack of telekinetic power did not, by any means, make him weak. Some cancelling out should be done before we go on to the meat of this verdict. In terms of basic telepathy, both are immune, and so mind tricks will not come into play. Plo Koon's ability to Force heal will not come into play as it is not quick enough to be a factor. Plo Koon's Anya Seth ability prevents Corran from launching a more powerful psychic attack his way. Any abilities to freeze water and dispel fog will not come into play on an even battlefield. Koon's ability with Malaysia cannot be counted as an effective mode of attack against Force wielders, and even if it were, I have a hard time believing that Horn would not have sufficient mental defenses to ward off the attack. Plo Koon has not shown a willingness to use either Force Crush or Force Grip in combat, and so Horn's complete inability to defend against those powers does not come into play on an even battlefield. At the end of the day, why I believe Horn will be victorious in a pure Force duel is not because he overpowers Plo Koon, but rather because he can neutralize any power sent at him and return it with equal force. Corran can observe Koon's force pushes. Koon bringing out his lightning would be the worst thing he could do, as it would allow for Horn to launch it back at him much the same way Yoda did to Dooku on Geonosis. And unlike Corran, Plo Koon has no stated ability with Tutaminis. While some will point out to how Kip Duran ragdolled Corran in the Jedi Temple hangar, we must not forget that Kip knew about Corran's limited powers and how to best exploit them. Plo Koon would have no such advantages in this hypothetical matchup, and may even make the incorrect assumption that because Corran could absorb force pushes, that he could absorb any force-based attack. Jedi Master Corran Horn gets the edge in force abilities. Plo Koon wore standard brown Jedi robes, along with wielding a standard Jedi lightsaber powered by a blue Ilum crystal. Plo Koon's weapon and equipment provided no extra benefits other than familiarity with his own handiwork. Corran Horn wore the standard green robes of the Corellian Jedi, and wielded a lightsaber that was uniquely constructed out of the spare parts of a speeder bike. Corran's lightsaber was what was known as a dual-phase lightsaber. While most lightsabers had a dial that could change the length of the blade, a dual-phase lightsaber allowed for the rapid lengthening or shortening of the blade during the midst of combat. Corran's default setting was a blade of the standard 1.5 meter length that was powered by a silver Adegan crystal. When the dual-phase setting activated, the power system would switch to a violet Adegan crystal, and his blade length would double to 3 meters. Resulting in a purple blade that was just short of 10 feet in length. Corran was seen typically employing this blade length against multiple opponents, but was known to use it as a surprise tactic, as suddenly having double the reach can provide obvious benefits in combat. Due to the fact that Corran Horn's unique saber provided him with extra options, Jedi Master Horn will get the edge in weaponry and equipment. And now, the verdict. For this fight, let's say it takes place in the Mos Eisley Spaceport Hangar number 35, with multiple loose objects of various sizes for the combatants to use. Additionally, let us assume that for the purpose of this fight, neither combatant recognizes the other, because one or both combatants recognizing each other would cause the combatants to behave differently than normal, and as such would not be an even playing field. Additionally, neither combatant will have time to prepare for the battle, and the fight will start with both combatants in full view of each other. And because in this case both are Jedi, we will assume that for the purposes of this engagement, that both will be vying for the kill. As a final tally for this matchup, I see the victor winning 8 times out of 10. This will be a scenario of one majority victory. Let us begin. For the early fight, I foresee the two combatants fighting on an even playing field. Corran would not feel the need to reach into his bag of tricks just yet, and since Plo Koon was first and foremost a lightsaber duelist, he would not break out his range of force abilities just yet either. Both combatants are close enough in martial skill that neither would be able to gain a conclusive edge so early in this fight. Plo Koon rushed forward, bringing his blade down in a hammer blow that was blocked by the human before him. Koon continued to push forward as the human gave way. Each step was accompanied by an attack, and a follow-up. The human before him was skilled. He would give him that. He would nimbly dodge as many strikes as he could, and would block or parry the rest. Koon began looking for an opening in the human's defenses. Specifically, he was looking for the opening presented by all combatants when they chose to leave the ground for an acrobatic dodge, a lack of mobility. Bringing his lightsaber in a low arc, He waited until the human was at the apex of his leap before transitioning into a spinning back kick that resulted in a grunt of pain as the man was sent several feet across the hangar. Corran was impressed by the Keldor. He was clearly a strength-based duelist, though he fought with enough tact to keep his approach measured to leave out the usual openings that came with such a grounded approach to combat. Corran gave a mock salute to his opponent, before taking the fight to him. Flicking his blade in increasingly intricate weaves of silver light, Corran danced around his opponent with a probing offensive meant to slip past the alien's stalwart guard. When he found that he was being unsuccessful, he instead decided to begin analyzing his opponent, while he fought looking for patterns and weaknesses he could exploit. After a time, Corran began to realize the form of his opponent somewhat resembled Master Skywalker's own style, along with what the late Darth Vader's style had been described as. This knowledge was beneficial to Corran, as he knew not to expect much in the way of acrobatics, but it did not help him in his current predicament of getting around his opponent's guard. The mid-fight will be mainly characterized by the integration of secondary skills into combat, with Plo Koon defending against Corran, who would likely begin looking for a way to surprise his opponent through trickery. Master Horn certainly had no shortage of tricks to draw on. Horn continued to dodge the alien's attacks. Cartwheel over a strike at his midsection. A slide under a diagonal slash, transitioning into a leg sweep to ward off a downward thrust. Corran had made up his mind on how he was going to proceed with the hastily contrived plan. The Keldor before him would know that his breath mask was a tempting target for any combatant of intelligence, and would likely expect any opponent to target it eventually. However, Corran would use such a ploy to lure his opponent into a false sense of security for his real plan that he would begin forming in his mind even now. Plo Koon noticed a subtle shift in the human stance and immediately adopted a defensive stance. If he had learned anything over his 7 decades of experience, it was to always be on guard in combat. He was quickly proven right when he found himself ducking under a vicious right hook aimed at dislodging his breath mask. Realizing what his opponent intended to accomplish, Koon pulled his guard tighter as he blocked slashes from a silver blade and human hands and feet coming anywhere near their target. Half a minute later, Koon realized he was growing complacent, which saved his life. Bringing his blade around to block another probing strike, a premonition told him to throw his force reserves into bracing his arms so strongly that no man could have hoped to push his blade back even a millimeter. Koon was shocked as he watched the human's blade quiver and then elongate, turning from a majestic silver to a brilliant purple. Along with doubling in length, the probing strike turned into a full power swing that slammed into Plo like a freight train, sending him flying across the docking bay, as the force-enhanced strength of the human coupled with the leverage of a 3-meter blade resulted in a level of force that was completely unexpected by Koon. Picking himself off the ground, Koon watched as the blade shrunk back to the silver form, the human having a disappointed look on his face. The late fight is where I foresee this slugging match ending the vast majority of times. That being said, it would be the late fight that force abilities would finally be brought out in full, as Koon would realize that he could not defeat Horn through saber skills alone. Corran Horn rushed in, aiming to cut down the Keldor before he could recover from the blow he had sustained. Once he got within striking range, Corran found himself airborne, as the hammer fist of a force wave sent him sailing. Managing to land upright, Corran realized that the alien before him was not out of the fight yet. Horn rushed forward again, but brought himself to a halt, reaching inside himself to absorb another force blast sent his way. Using the energy as a burst of speed, he closed the distance before the Keldor could unleash another force attack. Engaging the alien in a flurry of strikes, Horn gathered the force into himself for his final trick, one that would either net him a victory or get him killed. Waiting until the Keldor sent a piercing thrust at Corran's heart, he flicked off his lightsaber and pushed out his offhand. Plo Koon stared in astonishment as the human before him caught the incoming strike with his bare hand. Koon watched his blade sink halfway into his opponent's hand, and upon seeing the telltale ripples of power, knew that his opponent was a practitioner of Tutaminis. Realizing he had to make some space, Koon let loose a force wave aimed at sending the human across the hangar. Corran Horn in this moment was energy, the wealth of power inside of him having only been experienced by him twice before during his time as a knight. Then, his opponent made a mistake. Instead of launching a kick or punch, the Keldor let loose the force wave. Corran dropped his weapon and held out another hand to absorb that as well, the alien's lightsaber. However, instead of dropping his lightsaber, Corran's lightsaber remained in flight. While normally Horn could not hope to move the smallest of pebbles with the force, such an overload of energy allowed him to easily pluck the weapon from his freefall and aim it at the alien before flicking the switch on. Speared from stomach to skull, Plo Koon was dead before he hit the ground. Corran was released from continuing to absorb the lightsaber as Koon's grip went slack. Panting hard, Corran Horn sat down to catch his breath. And thus I declare Jedi Master Corran Horn the victor. Thank you all for watching this episode of the first season of the Versus series. Inspiration for this matchup came due to the fact that both Plo Koon and Corran Horn were Jedi who either chose by choice in Plo Koon's case, or by necessity in Corran Horn's case, to develop unconventional skills in both lightsaber dueling and force abilities. As for why I gave the victory to Horn, it was not so much that Plo Koon was not on an even playing field in terms of saber skills and force power, but rather that Plo Koon's skills simply did not translate well into a fight against Corran Horn. Plo Koon is a straightforward strength-based duelist, while Corran Horn is an elusive trickster, who preferred to deceive rather than overpower. Coupled with the fact that Corran was using one style that Koon could have never seen before, along with an extremely rare classical style, and Koon would not be able to overcome Horn in a pure saber duel, though he would be able to defend against it. Next, I wondered if Koon's greater avenue of offensive abilities, along with an immunity to mental intrusion, would allow him to simply overwhelm Corran. Further research of Horn's powers made it apparent, however, that none of Koon's preferred attack vectors would be successful. It became increasingly clear that the only effective way of attacking Corran Horn directly through the Force is with Force Crush or Force Grip. Unfortunately for Plo Koon, he has never been shown using either of those powers in combat. While I'm certainly not suggesting that Plo Koon does not have the availability to use the powers, as he most certainly can, it does mean that he would not be inclined to utilize them in combat. And since Plo Koon would not have any foreknowledge of Horn's abilities and deficiencies, this results in Plo Koon being unable to really do anything to Horn. And when any attack can be absorbed, it becomes increasingly clear that Corran would eventually come out on top, as eventually one of the items in his bag of tricks would succeed. It could be his unconventional lightsaber, him redirecting lightning, a Trickata technique, or, as illustrated previously, a combination of them. But at the end of the day, I believe that Corran Horn more likely than not would walk away victorious. However, keep in mind that this is all my opinion of a hypothetical matchup, and feel free to leave comments, criticisms, or suggestions for future matchups in the comments down below. As a reminder, I will be taking suggestions for future Season 2 matchups, and these suggestions can be in the form of a specific matchup, or simply a character you would like me to use. With that out of the way, this is the Phoenix Exalt signing out, and may the Force be with you, always.